Behind the Brand features the people who are making things happen. Get insights to grow your business from the experts who've done it. Get Behind the Brand. Sponsored by DocuSign, the global standard for e-signature. Get your free trial at DocuSign.com/Behind the Brand. Hi, I'm Bryan Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here with angel investor, best-selling author, and someone who's giving the most interesting man in the world a run for his money, Tim Ferriss. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. The Dos Equis man wins. He's got me beat.
I don't know. You are nipping at his heels. Tell us what's going on, man.
Oh, boy. Well, most recently working on The 4-Hour Chef, which has been really exciting because it is the first major book out of Amazon Publishing.
For people who don't know exactly what's happening, tell us about the resistance. The resistance.
La Resistance. Well, those are my people. So my army is La Resistance. But the net is that the 4-Hour Body was done through Random House and Crown, as was the 4-Hour Workweek. And then the 4-Hour Chef, the newest book, which is a book on learning disguised as a cookbook, has been done through Amazon Publishing. And they have been blocked at print retail by almost everyone because Barnes & Noble does not want to play nice with Amazon. And many of the indies also do not want to play nice. There's some people who are carrying it, but that is being done to handicap me at the lists and everything else to send a message and scare off other authors from signing with Amazon.
But
it has not worked, and it will continue to not work. So the book debuted at number 4 in the New York Times, which is appropriate, I suppose. It should have been number 1. They don't count Amazon ebooks, if you can believe that. So combined, it should have been number 2 or number 1. But it was number 1, a Wall Street Journal ebook. And I'm in it for the long haul. So the adventure continues. But that's what I'm focusing on these days.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I typically ask my guests, how did you get this job?
Boy, dumb luck, lots of mistakes. The first book was turned down by 26 publishers. I think a lot of folks don't realize that. And
the Workweek book was?
The Workweek book was, which is what most people, I suppose, know me for. It's in 35 plus languages. It's in well over 70 or 80 printings now in the US. And that was never intended to be a book. I was taking notes on my experiments while I was traveling around the world for 18 months, which then became the content for the very beginning of the 4-Hour Workweek. And I showed them to a friend of mine who was an author and jokingly said, "What do you think of this? Am I full of it, or should I turn this into something? Ha ha ha." And he took a look at it overnight, and much to my chagrin, wrote back and said, "Oh, actually, I want to introduce you to these 3 people and do this and do that and it'd be perfect for Fox and Friends." And I was like, whoa. Because I've always found writing really, really difficult.
And you were teaching too, right?
At that point, that's right. So at that time, I had been teaching twice a year at Princeton to a class called ELE 491, which was high-tech entrepreneurship, taught by an amazing professor named Ed Chow, who was formerly head of IBM Data Storage, congressman, competitive figure skater. So you can see where I've kind of borrowed some of his characteristics. A very inspiring guy. And one of the classes that I taught from Argentina, where I was at the time, I did it via phone, was where I first used this term lifestyle design and explain this concept of replacing traditional career planning and retirement-based planning with this lifestyle design concept.
It's kind of life hacking, as we know, right?
Yeah, in a way. And certainly that helped add to my stack of notes. And Another catalyst for all of this was a student who filled out the feedback form. I always send feedback forms. So there's one snarky student, which is pretty typically Princetonian, and I can say that because I went there, said in his optional comments, I don't know why you're teaching a class of 50 students. Why don't you just write a book and be done with it? Ha ha ha. It was not a serious recommendation, but it planted this seed. And I was turned down by a bunch of agents, despite being recommended to them by Jack Canfield, who sold I think has more than 500 million copies in print through Chicken Soup for the Soul. Yeah. So despite him recommending me, still got turned down.
But you had no social proof at that point, right?
Zero. Yeah. Certainly for anything writing related.
Which is, perfectly indicative of the majority, right? Like, here's a brilliant idea, here's something awesome, and they reject it.
Well, it's like banks don't want to give you money until you don't need it, right? And insurance companies don't want to give you insurance unless you don't need it. And I think that as much as lip service is paid in most industries to wanting to innovate, no, they don't. They want to be second to market. And there's something to be said for that. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. Apple, they weren't the first people to put songs on something resembling an iPod,
right,
but they did it better. And there's a lot to be said for that, but I find it more fun to do the experimentation. And I think the BitTorrent partnership is a good example of that with the new book, where I took somewhere between 100 and 200 megabytes of content, including tons of samples from the book, cut recipes, videos, behind the scenes stuff, actual process videos where I'm sharing with my team and going over different materials and how I give feedback and how they give feedback. Really fun stuff, and just giving it away for free.
Yeah.
And the results have been amazing. I mean,
well, let's unpack that just a little bit, because what you're talking about is subtle, and people who are watching this, maybe aspiring authors or current authors or people thinking about some sort of digital good.
Yeah.
I mean, like never before, the technology is there for us to create something that is platform friendly, right?
Yeah.
Here you've got video, basically making your book come alive.
Yep.
Pictures, all the kinds of things, that, even the length of the book, right, which make it a little bit cost prohibitive to do maybe,
an expanded version of the 672-page book.
Right? I mean,
I cut 250 pages. There's a lot of stuff left over.
Yeah. Talk to us about digital, though, and how it's reshaping the way you think about writing, because there's many things I think that are amazing about you. One is the fact that you continue to crank out quality books so fast. I mean, it just kind of blows my mind.
I don't recommend it.
And I can only imagine, and I'll let you elaborate, the amount of preparation and research and testing and experimentation that goes into it, because I know you're legit. But I don't know how, you must not be human, to be able to get these books out like you've been doing. I mean, it's amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. I think each of my books, especially this last one, which was by far the most complicated that I've put together, and I could not be happier with how it came together. I'm so proud of it. But I think it took 5 biological years off my life in the year and a half that I did it. And we had teams around the world working on it. It was by far the most complicated and sophisticated orchestra that we had to put together.
So you consulted with chefs, with people who knew about science, with
chess
artisans,
chess prodigies, memory champions, all of the world's fastest learners that I could get my hands on, ranging from cartooning to supermodels to marksmen, everything. And just to answer your first question about digital is changing everything. And one of the reasons I decided to go with Amazon is because they're in an ideal position to capitalize on that. They're the only company, the only major publisher now that is a B2C company. If you think about what I mean by that is they can contact either of us as customers. They can speak directly to every one of their customers, and they know exactly what their customers like. If you look at a traditional publisher like Simon & Schuster, their customer is not the end reader. Their customer is the head category buyer at Barnes & Noble, the head category buyer at Books A Million. Now, when you look at digital, where you get down to let's say, in some cases, a fixed or variable cost of zero, ostensibly. Of course, there's some costs involved. But you can do very interesting things, like offer a book for free in the hopes that people will then buy the print edition for an superior tactile experience, which we've seen. And I'll have data on that. But where we've sold the book, let's say, at $9.99, then at $4.99, given a coupon back for $5 to people who buy the print edition, so they get print and digital at the same time, but also looked at how many people, what percentage buy the $4.99 digital, and then also buy the print. So you have this type of cross-platform synergy that I think is really fascinating. But on top of that, you can treat a book like a movie almost, the DVD extras.
Yeah.
And you have tools like BitTorrent, which, although people know it for piracy, for instance, it is the best way to move ones and zeros around the internet. End of story. Moving really big files, it is the best way to do it, in my opinion. So what they've turned into is this incredible content marketing opportunity where you have people like the Counting Crows using it. Just to give you a number that blows my mind, in the first, I'd say probably 3 to 4 days of this going, the bundle was downloaded 210,000 times.
Wow.
Check this out though. More than 85,000 people clicked through to the Amazon page after or during downloading the bundle.
That's insane.
And we had to double, triple, quadruple check because they couldn't believe it and I couldn't. I was like, that has to be wrong, and it wasn't
click-through
wrong.
rates are less than 1%.
Yeah, 85,000 out of 210,000. Where does that happen? And that was just so exciting for me because that just blows away every expectation I would have had. And I'm really excited about the future of content marketing, but in many ways, in the same fashion that you have, let's say, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, who all used to be very cleanly separate on this collision course where they're competing in all these same verticals. I think you're going to end up having television producers, movie producers, writers, songwriters, all competing for the same mental bandwidth.
Interesting.
In many, many ways.
Interesting.
So yes, it's never been easier to create content and self-publish. It's never been harder to get the attention that you would want or need to really put something into orbit.
So let's unpack that a little bit. Let's talk about community and how important that is. You know, you met a lot of resistance with the traditional marketing machine.
Yeah.
You went to your army, your community.
Yeah.
And you just said it, you know, two of the most difficult things to build are trust and attention.
Yeah.
And then to maintain that attention. So how important is keeping in touch with the people that are following you? And, you know, how are you leveraging social media to, you know, reach out, connect with people, and get them to do stuff?
Yeah. There are a few ways. And I'll probably throw in a few cliches, but I'll make a few recommendations right off the bat. Because I think that the term marketing can be very confusing to people, as well as social media. So I'll clarify the way that I use those terms. Marketing to me means identifying exactly who your ideal customer is, knowing their behaviors, knowing their age, knowing their gender, knowing their location, all of these things, what kind of music they listen to. And 9 times out of 10, in my opinion, the easiest way to do that is just to sell to people who are as similar to you as possible. At least start with that.
Yeah.
And the target is not your market. What I mean by that is when I launched the 4-Hour Workweek, part of why I was able to target so effectively and so cost effectively was because I went after 25 to 35-year-old tech-savvy males who read at least one or more of, let's say, 10 different blogs or websites, and went to 2 or 3 conferences every year, who primarily lived in 4 or 5 cities.
Mm-hmm.
And why did I know all that? Because I'm in that demographic. And
so let me ask, so how did you, I mean, it's brilliant to be able to stumble onto that watering hole, right? But how do you, if I'm a new company, if I have a startup and I know who I want to reach, I don't know how to reach them, how do you go out and find them?
Depends on if you're trying to reach, let's say, customers, consumers, influencers. There are different approaches. But the recommended reading I would put out there is 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly, founding editor of Wired. It's a very short piece. And then The Truth About Social Media, or The Truth About Social Media Marketing by Tim O'Reilly. If you only read those 2 things, and 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, if you read those 3, which you could do in one day, you'd be set. I think that you would avoid developing a lot of bad habits. How you contact them depends on where they are in the, let's just say, blogosphere hierarchy compared to you. There are different approaches. if you're trying to connect with people who are more influential than you are, I think in person is the least crowded channel. So I went to South by Southwest Interactive. I went to CES. My very first conference, I crashed. I was sort of like the wedding crashers equivalent for conferences, was CES, and I never ever went to CES. I actually spent all my time at a sponsored blogger lounge, which was sponsored by Seagate, and simply asked people questions. I wanted to know what people were doing, what they were excited about, and if they happened to ask me what I was doing, which eventually most of them would do, I'd say, oh, I'm working on my first book, really nervous about it. I don't know much about tech, but I'm here to learn.
Yep.
And after, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes of conversation, if they were genuinely interested in what I was doing, then I would offer to send them a copy and flag the 10 to 20 pages they might like. And I would be very explicit about, number one, not hard pitching. Number two, saying, I actually don't think anyone will like the entire book, but there are 10 to 20 pages that I think you'd really like. And I would specify, flag it, send it to them. And I always gave them an easy out. And I think that the soft sell is very undervalued. But for reaching influential people, I think that in-person is the least crowded and the most effective, because they have to trust the messenger before they will endorse the message.
Right.
And a lot of people forget that. They're like, here's my perfect book for your audience. Here's my guest post I've already drafted. Thanks for putting it up next Friday. And you're like, I don't know you. Like,
right.
What if the next week you run out and do something stupid and humiliate me, or by association, because I didn't do my homework on you as a person?
You talk about Warren Buffett a lot in the book.
Yeah.
Have you met Warren?
I've asked Warren and Charlie Munger a question before. So I've gone to the Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting in Omaha, which was amazing. It's like Woodstock for investors. It's pretty wild. But I have a tremendous amount of respect for how they analyze things.
Yeah, and you have a great piece, I think, on the the perfect elevator pitch, or what you should do as an excerpt or part of the book. It's pretty smart.
Yeah, it's. I like to break my books into effectively several books in one. So
I noticed that.
Yep. So I have a number of, and I have so many author friends and publishing friends who think I'm an idiot for doing this, because they say, why are you killing yourself like you do to put out one book that you could easily split into 5 books and just like drip it out over 4 or 5 years? And I want to give people the definitive book to X and just say, here you go. You never have to buy another book on this subject.
Well, I also think it's a glimpse into the brain of Tim Ferriss. A lot of people would probably love to pick your brain, like I'm doing right now. You're jealous, aren't you? But to me, and we're just getting to know each other better.
Yeah.
To me, the book is a lot about a lot like you. It's eclectic. Sure. It's someone all over the place. Several different things.
Yeah.
But it's also very focused. So the things that you do talk about, you break them down so specifically. You talk about how to throw a knife successfully to get it stuck in the target. You talk about how to create the most amazing meal. You talk about all the things that are so, I don't want to say the word random, but you talk about
seemingly the most unrelated that are in fact really related. That's the stuff I like.
Like the dancing thing,
dancing, language learning, swimming, 3-pointers.
But they are all somewhat laced together, and so it's eclectic and wild, but it's also very exciting and interesting, and that's why I called you rivaling the most interesting man in the world, because I think you're right there.
Well, I've been very fortunate to. Well, to your point, I think that writing is thought on paper. That's all it is. So I recommend to all people, even if they don't plan on being a writer per se, if they want to tighten up their thinking and have it improve everything else, they should focus on short writing exercises with people who can edit their work. And the person who edits their work for, let's say, extra fluffy language doesn't have to be a great writer. They have to be a good thinker. So, for instance, lawyers are really good at editing writing, oftentimes.
Interesting.
Because they pull out all the superfluous, ambiguous nonsense. And On Writing Well is a great book, Bird by Bird for the psychological aspect, and then Letters to a Fiction Writer, even if you're not a fiction writer. All 3 are fantastic. In terms of the most interesting man in the world, there are many people that I look to as inspiration, like Richard Feynman.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So who are some of the people that you admire? You got inspiration
there's so
from?
many, but Richard Feynman is such to my mind, just an iconic and incredibly gifted and thoughtful teacher. I mean, he was, of course, a world-class physicist, Nobel Prize winner, but also an incredibly gifted teacher. And I value that extremely highly, and also very eclectic. I mean, he collected skills, like playing the bongo, safe cracking, whatever it might be, dancing. Ben Franklin, very similar to Feynman. But Ben Franklin was fascinating to me because he demonstrated the power of the amateur, I think. Someone who goes into a field with no preconceived notions and becomes an amateur scientist, and I use that in quotation marks, and then revolutionizes that field while doing the same in printing, while doing the same in diplomacy. And I don't think the era of polymaths is over. I just think that people have been taught that they have to specialize like an insect, and therefore they stop exploring.
Well, I think I agree with that. I think, people want to put either themselves or other people in a box, a category. Oh, you're that guy.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
That's
right.
all you're good for. When in reality,
Yeah.
there's so much more.
There's so much more. And there are modern examples. I mean, you look at someone like, there's so many. Where to even begin? Well, we were just talking about one of them. Gymkhana, Ken Block.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no idea. You just told me that start DC shoes. It's like, my Lord, okay, that's incredible to me. So now you have world class in 2 things, 3 things, 4 things. Ray Kurzweil, another good example. Music synthesizers, predictions of technology development, artificial intelligence, so forth and so on. And there are such people out there. They're not talked about as much as the specialists because they're harder to categorize, like you said.
And it seems like in all your books, but especially 4-Hour Chef, you are really trying to teach people the principles of how to learn things quickly, right? I mean, you talk a lot about language. I had no idea that you spent time in Japan. I did a study abroad.
Oh, cool. Were you in Japan as well?
日本語で話しましょうか。
Yeah, bring it on, man. 日本語でいいよ。なんとなく日常会話くらいだったら。
But it's amazing how you have broken down language learning, and then applied that to other areas, whether it's knife throwing or learning how to prepare the perfect meal. Talk to us about your passion for teaching. I mean, where does that come from?
I had a handful of teachers who really changed my life and put me on the right path when I could have very easily gone on the wrong path.
Yeah, your dedication, you say that you were a hellion. I kind of get the impression that you're still a little bit of a hellion, creating a ruckus, but...
Yeah, I was stubborn. I was very stubborn. And I had a number of teachers. I mean, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Vinsky, I had a wrestling coach in high school who really changed a lot of things for me, Mr. Buxton, Reverend Greenleaf, who was my resident advisor in high school, later in high school. There are these figures that I look to who really have enabled me to get to where I am and avoid a lot of really bad pitfalls.
Yeah.
And I want to have that impact. So I always thought I was going to teach 9th or 10th grade. I always thought I was going to teach 9th or 10th grade. But I wanted to go out in the world and have more experiences and successes before I did that. I didn't want to teach because I couldn't do.
Yeah.
I wanted to teach because I had lessons to share. And it just turned out that the books and the blog have turned into my megaphone and my Archimedes lever for teaching.
Yeah.
So I am teaching. It's just through different means.
Yeah, and the scope of things that you're teaching, everything from, that famous video that went viral about you getting the yolk and whatnot out of the egg.
Oh, right. So peeling a hard-boiled egg without peeling it. Yeah, basically blowing the egg out of the shell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, that's crazy. I know that video went nuts. That was like 4 million, 5 million views.
Yeah. But that how-to thing is, I think, you identified not only a trend before it was a trend, but you identified what people are looking for, what people are searching for. And it's so simple, but yet so brilliant.
And my general policy is one that I recommend to startup founders also, and that is scratch your own itch. Same deal with authors, same advice. Scratch your own itch. Write the book you can't find that you want to read. Build the product that you want, that you're currently cobbling together some MacGyver solution for. Make that product. And at least then you have a verified consumer base of 1.
Right.
And there's so many companies and so many authors and so many bloggers and so many fill in the blank who could avoid almost all of the problems they encounter if they just built things for themselves.
Yeah. So it is about following that inner voice, your guts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What bothers you? And that's actually a really good way to write. That was advice that I got from Poe Bronson at one point. So Poe Bronson wrote, I think it was Nudist in the Late Shift, What Should I Do with My Life, a bunch of really good books. He's a good writer. And his answer to what should I do when I have writer's block is, write about what makes you angry. And it's amazing what comes out of that. And it's not that your writing has to be full of anger, but when you talk about the things that bother you, you address things that are common to other people.
Yeah. That's a great point. And one of my favorite blog posts of yours is the one that you talked about haters and
Right.
negative feedback. It was
Yeah.
it was a brilliant post. It still resonates with me today. I love what you said. For those that didn't get a chance to read it, talk a little bit about what you said about people who are negative and haters.
Yeah. The most important thing I think to take away from that, I guess sort of 7 to 10 principles that I use, but the most important I think is it's not about how many people don't get it. It's about how many people get it. And the vast majority, the silent majority, will actually like your stuff. And the minority who dislike your stuff, or dislike everything.
Yeah. You said that there's a certain percentage, no matter what.
Loudest. Well, exactly. So if you have a strong opinion about anything, or a clear opinion about anything, I just assume when I put up a blog post that somewhere around 10% of the people who come across it will find a way to take it personally.
Right.
And I gave examples about like raising money for high-need public schools in the U.S.
Yeah.
Where somebody got really offended because I talked about wrestling and like butting heads with my co-founder.
How dare you?
Or with the founder of Donors Choose, this amazing organization. And the guy went ballistic, like vandalized all of my Flickr photos because he thought I was endorsing violence. The guy was a nutcase.
Yeah.
And the internet is a full contact sport.
Yeah.
And lastly, I would say,
Now, you feel that way now? You're thick-skinned, but was there ever a time where that sort of, the sticks and stones thing that hurt
in
you?
the beginning, it was really tough, for sure, because I tried to treat the internet as if it were a conversation with a civil human being in a living room.
You take it personally,
and it's
right?
not the same.
Yeah.
I remember in the very beginning. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to curse on the show or not, so I'll try to contain it. I'm from Long Island; it's hard, but
let it fly. It's the internet.
All right, great. So my first 1-star Amazon review, I remember to this day. I got it on the 4-Hour Workweek, and my dad took all of these reviews very personal. I was like, "That's fine.
Yeah.
Don't engage."
Yeah.
But of course, I wanted to engage, and I remember this really. It was some short 1-star review. It was just like, "This guy's a scam. Can't believe this bullshit." Blah blah blah. And so I wrote this long, impassioned response with like, "Dear so and so, I understand how you feel, but you may not realize this and this," and like went point by point this long essay.
Yeah.
And his response was, "Yeah, whatever, douche." And I was like, and then my publisher at the time, I think it was my editor, said, "Don't bother doing that." And it taught me a lesson. I've learned many lessons since, but there are some great quotes that I think embody the internet. And yellow journalism has always existed. Critics have always existed. But the beauty and horror of the internet is that it gives everyone a voice. That includes the geniuses. It also includes all the idiots who should have to like pass a test to use a keyboard. And there's some fantastic quotes by people like Theodore Roosevelt about the critic who finds it easy to mock the man on the playing field when he stumbles.
Yeah.
But it's always easier to tear people down than it is to build yourself up.
Yeah.
And
does that fuel you? Does that give you, does that drive? Or are you pretty indifferent? You just let it roll off your back now?
About the criticism?
Yeah.
I am relatively indifferent. The best response, this was taught to me by Kevin Rose, to most of it is to starve it of oxygen. Don't give it any response.
Yeah.
And there are, I think, philosophical reasons not to do that. There are also practical reasons. If you draw attention to something, all you're doing is driving links to it, which increases its Google visibility.
Right.
And,
I agree
people
with you.
now attack me just to try to provoke that type of response because they want page views.
Right.
And so I really ignore most of it. And to the extent that I remember during the first book launch, at one point, my agent, who's great, Steve Hanselman, was sending me all the different reviews and blog posts and whatnot that came up on Google Alerts. And I got to a point where I said, "Look, Steve, if it's negative, if I don't have to absolutely action it somehow, I don't want to see it.
Right.
Like, I need my morale, I need my enthusiasm for this process, and let me just forge ahead."
Yeah. I really think a lot of that negativity is, sure, there's people who are sensationalists. They want the press, they want
Yeah.
the controversy of the links, whatnot. But I also think a large percent of those, especially the anonymous comments,
Yeah.
are people that are just projecting the way they feel about themselves.
Sure.
They're not happy about where they are. They're
Yeah.
underachieving, or they had some bad luck, or
Yeah.
they're just not happy. And it's that kind of misery loves company thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and contending with this type of issue is greatly aided with some type of practical philosophy. And the way I look at philosophy is ideally as an operating system for life, for making decisions about what you should do and should not do. And Stoicism, I won't go off on a huge Stoicism tangent, but specifically Seneca, Letters from a Stoic, I find to be the ideal operating system for entrepreneurs and people who want to thrive in high-stress environments and high-pressure environments. And one of the precepts that you might read from Seneca is that anger is like acid in a vessel, and
Right.
it damages the vessel more than what has the acid poured onto it.
Right.
And so effectively responding to people or delivering your punishment to them by letting them continue to be who they are
Yeah.
is I think an important concept. But sometimes it bothers me, sometimes it doesn't. And I should make one thing clear, that the term hater is also very overused. So constructive criticism is not being a hater. That's
Right.
constructive criticism. And I very readily engage with people on my blog or elsewhere
Yeah.
who are civil and have a legitimate point that isn't delivered with a bunch of ridiculous curse words and an awful tone. I just don't tolerate that, because I do treat, for instance, the comments on my blog, and I write this in the comment rules, as my living room. Like, if you come into my house and kick off your shoes and throw it up on the table and kick a glass off my table, I'm going to kick you out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to get invited back. I will blacklist you. I have no problem with that. And that policing, moderating, has been really important for building the community that I have today. If you look at, let's say, the New York City Police Department and how they have responded to certain things in the past, there's a theory developed called the broken window theory. And that was, if you left broken windows unrepaired in certain neighborhoods, that would lead to graffiti, that would lead to petty crime, to violent crime, then to homicide.
Right.
You could see it.
Snowball.
You could see a snowball like that. And Matt Mullenweg, a good friend of mine, lead developer of WordPress, explained how this applied to blogs, and that if you allow petty abusive behavior in comments, it escalates very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And then
It's the mob mentality.
That type of bad behavior attracts other people who want to engage in that bad behavior.
Right. You're almost enabling it.
Yeah, so I have I allow people to get into some heated debates, but you'll see comments I'll throw in every once in a while, which is like, play nice, remember to play nice.
Mm-hmm.
And people are allowed to attack me if it's civil. They're not allowed to attack each other.
Right.
And there was at one point a study done, it was actually quite interesting, the methodology on reader quality. There was a reader quality assessment that was done on like the top 20 tech blogs or so, and my blog was thrown in there for consideration. And there were a number of different factors and elements and criteria and rankings and whatnot, and my blog had the highest reader quality score of any tech blog. I'm not saying that's true now, but by that methodology it was, and I do think that's because I facilitate intelligent debate, I facilitate optimistic and helpful constructive debate, and I have a zero tolerance policy for idiots.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about fear.
Sure.
So you've done a lot
One
of
of my
things.
favorite topics.
You've done a lot of things in your life, and I didn't know until I read the book that you were not a really strong swimmer until just over the age of 30.
Oh, no, I was like 2.5, 3 years ago. Couldn't swim at all. Couldn't swim. I mean,
Yeah.
I could bob up and down in the water, but couldn't swim more than, let's say, in a short pool, like a backyard pool,
Yeah.
there and back. Couldn't do it without panicking.
So you're all about facing your fears. You're about learning and breaking through. But what are some of the things that you're still afraid of?
They're in a different category. I fear watching my parents get older. That is one of the few things that I fear. I fear physical.
Is it because you lose them, or?
It's an inevitable process. It is part of the cycle of life, and I've seen my grandparents deteriorate. I've watched my grandparents deteriorate, and That's something I fear on some level.
So you're very close with your parents.
I'm close with my parents,
Yeah.
close with my entire family, and but it's outside of this. It's outside of my control. I can help in certain ways, but you learn to contend with that, and you develop a mental model for looking at it, so you can be constructive instead of constantly pessimistic about it.
Are you afraid of getting older?
Not really. I'm not afraid of getting older. No, I wouldn't put it that way.
There's such
I'm
an
actually
emphasis.
pretty excited about being like a cantankerous old man. I'm really excited about that.
And yet, a lot of things that you're doing are based around these amazing kind of health, nutrition,
Yeah.
Monitoring of your blood and your all of those
Yeah.
things, which would keep someone younger or feeling better or whatever.
Yeah, my girlfriend put it a good way. She said that the 4-hour body was about putting years in your life, and the 4-hour chef is about putting life in your years.
Nice.
Because it's not how long you live, it's how well you live.
Right.
And there are different ways to define that, but I think it's a combination of achievement and appreciation. And if you don't appreciate what you have now, nothing you ever get will make you satisfied or happy. And therefore, especially for someone like me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, I'm hardwired to be an alcoholic. Not an alcoholic, workaholic. I do have a lot of wine, but
Take two.
I'm hardwired to be a workaholic. And this, once an addict, always an addict. I know that. So I have to build in a practice, like a scheduled practice of focusing on gratitude and the things I appreciate, the things I'm happy for. It's very important. It's like a prescription that I give myself.
So if I'm watching this and I am trying to appreciate what I have, but I feel stuck, what's your message to those people?
Stuck in what way?
So, I'm not happy with where I am in my career, or I have a startup and we're not achieving the success we want.
Yep.
You can look around and say, I'm grateful to have a place to live and have a great support system, family, whatever, but what if I am stuck?
Sure. I think you can have both. I think it's important to have some level of gratitude so that you can act from a calm, analytical place as opposed to a state of overwhelm, or a state of rushing, because that is when big mistakes get made. So I'd say a few things. Number one is do a gratitude list. 3 things you're grateful for. First thing when you wake up, first thing before, or last thing before you go to bed. Just as a ritual, make that part of your schedule. Then I would say scheduling 2 things, 80-20 analysis and fear setting. And I do that every 2 weeks or so. This is something I schedule for twice a month. So let's say every other Monday or every other Friday, I will do 80-20 analysis and fear setting. What that means is I will look at the 20% of activities or activities and people that are producing 80% of the results and positive emotional states that I want. Then I'll look at the 20% of activities and people that are producing 80% of the problems or negative emotional states in my life. I'll also look at the 20% of people or activities that are consuming 80% or more of my time. And based on the results of that analysis, which does not take long, do this on a piece of paper. It takes 15 to 30 minutes. I put together a to-do list and a not-to-do list. And then I'll circle the 1 or 2 most important force multipliers, the things that if done properly would change everything, and the things that if not done at all would change everything else. Okay, that's the 80-20 piece of it. The fear setting piece is looking at why you haven't done the most important to do, or why you haven't stopped doing the most important not to do.
Addressing the gorilla in the room or the obstacle that's in front of you.
Defining your fear very clearly. And it's just like goal setting. If you don't have specificity in your goal, you will not achieve it because you can't aim properly for the target. Fear is very similar. So let's say you're considering shutting down your startup. Okay, that's a big deal. It's a much bigger emotional deal than just quitting a job. Let's say someone's considering winding down their startup. All right, so you would, instead of having this ambiguous fear that prevents you from making any changes, you would take out a piece of paper, and on the left-hand side, in one column, you would write down all of the worst things that could happen in great detail. So you could not be able to pay your mortgage, right? And then you'd have to do A, B, and C. You might lose this, that, and the other thing. Your co-founder would have to do blah, 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 whatever it is. And then in the second column, the next column, you write down all the things you could do to minimize the likelihood of those things happening. In the third column, you identify all the things you could do to get back to where you are now if it happened. Right? And when you lay things out like that, you realize that most actions, whether it's doing something new or stopping something you're currently doing, have very low risk. And what I mean by risk, this is another word that gets thrown around a lot, like success and happiness, that people don't stop to define, and that is the origin of a lot of problems. Risk to me is the potential for an irreversible negative outcome. That's it. And there are very few things that actually fall in that category. And by doing the 80-20 analysis to choose those few most important items to either do or not do, and then doing the fear setting on a regular basis, you're able to act on the most important things. And being effective, i.e. doing the right things, choosing the things you do very carefully, is more important than being efficient, which is doing things well. So if you do a lot of things well, that doesn't automatically make them important.
Let's talk about that for a second. So you're an angel investor. What are some of the characteristics that make up a great founder, a great startup team?
Yeah, there are a few that I look for, and I think it's different by investor.
And what kind of companies are you investing in? Tech companies mainly, or?
Mostly tech companies, but I'm involved in between 20 and 30 companies. I'd say active at any given time, where I'm really spending a lot of time, 5 to 6. But that includes companies like Evernote, Uber, StumbleUpon, Twitter, Facebook, Shopify, Nextdoor, which is something people are going to hear a lot more about. So forth and so on. But I'm also involved with, say, there are a few restaurants that I'm involved with. That's more for fun than anything else. Blue Bottle Coffee, and a few more developed companies like Alibaba and ClearCard, for instance, which is physical biometrics platforms in airports that allow you to skip the security line.
So what do you look for in these guys?
There are a few things I look for. My general approach, my general set of criteria, in founders, you mean specifically?
Yeah.
I look for people who ideally have done something extremely high stress before, where failure is constant. Sports, previous startups, sales, something where they are accustomed to facing rejection or failure on a smaller or large scale almost every day. That is extremely important.
So the resiliency factor is key.
It's key. I don't care how smart someone is, how many MBAs they have. If they haven't dealt with the pressure and stresses of a fast-paced, in this case, venture-backed startup, with board of directors to contend with, building teams to HR headaches to contend with, they will implode. And that's number one. Number two would be the pretty simple, and I've heard friends of mine, investors, put it different ways. So the beer test is like, would you actually want to go out and have a beer with this person?
Yeah, if you get along with them.
Yeah,
personality.
Yeah, or one I like a lot is the mall test. So the mall is, like, if you're walking through the mall with your girlfriend or something like that, or your wife, and you look over and you see this person from like 50 feet away, and they don't see you. Do you do this? Do you go, oh, hey, and keep walking? Or do you like walk right over and be like, dude, how's it going?
Yeah.
And actually won't sit down with them. And that's extremely important. The third would be just a basic understanding of the economics at work, and having a very keen understanding of the competitive landscape, a clearly defined problem, and a very clearly defined customer. But typically now when I'm getting involved with companies, I'm pouring gasoline on something that is already showing some social proof. They already have some traction. I am also looking at things that I could be a power user of, things I would use myself.
Yeah.
Even if they're free, things that I would pay for, like Evernote, for instance. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there are pricing issues. We don't have to get into that, but I mean, there are prices at which startups make no sense, which is something a lot of people are forgetting these days. It's like, I'm happy that you're investing in a hot startup, but you're not reading your terms. Yeah. And I think it was Henry Ford who said, "I'll let you name the price if I can name the terms."
Yeah.
You got to read your terms.
What do you think of a show like Shark Tank?
Shark Tank's entertaining. I know Damon. I've met Mark a few times. I don't have any strong opinion about it one way or the other. I think it's very helpful to see what type of pitches work and don't work.
Yeah. Could you see yourself being on a show like that?
I've been asked to be on shows like that, and up to this point I haven't done it. Not to say I wouldn't, but I'm not sure. I'm not very good, and this sounds like some kind of weird, like humble brag thing, but I'm not very good at being like a mean guy or a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like browbeating people.
Which makes for good TV.
It makes for good TV,
Yeah.
and I can talk truth. I won't sugarcoat things for people, but it's perhaps not as dramatic as it would need to be.
So what do you think of the new Silicon Valley show?
I know a bunch of the people involved. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a single episode, so I don't know. But primetime TV is a very peculiar animal, and I don't think I have the requisite ingredients to produce something for that outlet. I just don't, and it's not a judgment thing. I don't think I can't personally be good in that format. But it is, I think, very, very instructive to watch negotiating in real time. That is where I do like the Shark Tank, when they have negotiation of terms live. Because someone like Damon, if you haven't read your books, if you haven't done your rehearsals, your dry runs, and planned out all the decision trees, you're going to get steamrolled.
Right. Well, you talk about that in the book too. Some negotiating strategies about how to leverage, media buys and different things, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and there's some easy resources. I mean, Secrets of Power Negotiating by Dawson. Getting Past No is a great book. And then you have to practice. You have to practice, because it's a lot like boxing. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
It's like, your script sounds great until you get someone who's really, really good and knows what they're doing, and they're just like, come on, man, don't have all day. Like, let's speed it up. Come on, kid. And then you're like, and then you freeze.
Yeah, deer in the headlights.
Yeah. You have to practice.
We've been spending a little time with arguably the most interesting man in the world, Tim Ferriss. Tim, thanks so much for dropping by.
Oh, you kidding? My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. This Behind the Brand episode is brought to you by DocuSign, the global standard for e-signature. Get your free trial at DocuSign.com/behindthebrand.